Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee, every Friday, live on France 24, reflecting on the past 7 days with a panel of international correspondents. And it's been a week of coordinated, choreographed diplomacy for 10 Western leaders who formally recognised Palestine as a state. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he chose to do so now because Israeli demands for a Gaza ceasefire were falling on deaf ears in Israel, insisting the recognition was, quote, reviving a hope of peace in the face of growing horror in the Middle East. The Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, claimed Britain and France, the two former colonial powers, were correcting historical injustices a century on from carving up the spheres of influence after the First World War. Benjamin Netanyahu said it rewards terrorism, no more, no less, insisting there would never be a Palestinian state.
Your disgraceful decision will encourage terrorism against Jews and against innocent people everywhere. It will be a mark of shame on all of you.
It's been a week that's seen the sentencing of Nicolas Sarkozy to 5 years in prison for the former French president found guilty of criminal conspiracy in a case dubbed the Libya Connection. It centred around allegations Mr. Sarkozy had been gifted up to $50 million for funding his 2007 election campaign out of the pocket of the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. The quid pro quo, it's claimed, was that Sarkozy promised to help clean up Gaddafi's reputation as a Western pariah. Notably, the court ruled there was not enough evidence to find Sarkozy as the beneficiary, but did find him guilty of allowing officials to contact the regime to try to obtain financial support, a verdict he's appealing.
And if they absolutely want me to sleep in prison, I will sleep in prison, but with my head held high.
In the week, the United Nations marked its 80th year anniversary. World leaders gathered at the UN General Assembly for speeches, although no cake for President Trump, who's, in a no-holds-barred 58-minute speech, called the UN a total failure, accused the organisation of failing to live up to its promise and demanded an inquiry into triple sabotage, he said, over a malfunctioning teleprompter, a dodgy sound system, and calling for the arrest of whoever turned off the escalator.
I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle.
Time to meet this week's panel, and standing room only again in the studio. 2 weeks running we've had a full house. Let's welcome 3 times Pulitzer Prize nominated independent international correspondent Basu Daragahi. Welcome back to the programme.
Thank you.
A friend of the programme who is based between Paris and Istanbul, which places us nicely to talk about the Turkish president this week. The first time in 6 years he's been back to meet President Trump in the White House. I want to ask you about your take on that, but first I want to see, this is the moment of what was going on, the introduction between the 2 NATO allies.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with President Erdogan of Turkey, and we've been friends for a long time, actually, even for 4 years when I was in exile, unfairly, as it turns out. Rigged election, he knows about rigged elections better than anybody.
He kept a very steady face after that. What do you make of that?
I mean, I can't believe he said that, because it was Erdogan who rigged elections and who rigs elections. As a matter of fact, the relationship between Trump and Erdogan goes back a long time to the building of Trump Tower in Istanbul, the family ties between the Erdogan family and the Trump family, very interesting to explore. But in many ways, Erdogan wrote the rule book that Trump is following, cracking down on election transparency, cracking down on the media, having billionaire friends buy up the major media outlets and so on. This is exactly what Trump is doing now, cracking down on dissents, demonizing his enemies. Erdogan, he was the OG of this kind of populist politics that Trump is pursuing.
And he was facing, there's a lot of Turkish journalists asking questions about Turkey wanting more F-35s. There was a quid pro quo of sorts. We're hearing that the Turkish main airline has bought, 220 Boeing jets?
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge order that came through actually either late last night or this morning. And they're confirmed orders. They're not, it's not an MOU. It's a little bit higher than a memorandum of understanding. But, the question always with Turkey is, will the influential members of Congress allow the deal to go through?
Bonjour, great to have you with us tonight. Also, we have with us Dalal Mawad, Paris-based Lebanese correspondent for the Al Arabi Network, author of All She Lost, The Explosion in Lebanon, The Collapse of a Nation and the Women Who Survive, a book that weaves together the stories and interviews of the 2020 Beirut port explosion. Great to have you back with us, Dalal.
Thank you for having me.
It wasn't long ago that I had the Lebanese Deputy Prime Minister on the programme who talked about the commitment to try to persuade, if not force, Hezbollah to give up its arms. How's that going?
He just made a statement a few hours ago saying there will be measures taken against Hezbollah because of what happened yesterday. The government banned during the commemoration of the assassination of, Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah and his cousin, banned the projection of their faces on the famous rocks, Rawshi rocks in Beirut. And Hezbollah and their partisans defied that decision and went ahead with the projection during the ceremony. And I think it says a lot about, the times that Lebanon is going through. Yes, the government is trying to disarm Hezbollah through a national internal dialogue without resorting to force. The Lebanese army has a plan that's supposed to, be implemented by the end of the year. And both the government and the president have made commitment in their, speeches to go towards disarmament and state building. And we're at a turning point for state building, but it's scenes like that yesterday that, defy the principle of state institutions and state building. It's unfortunate that, their defiance also has come down to that. It's, you could commemorate, you have the right, but if there's a decision taken by a government, it should be respected, and they didn't respect that, regardless of what you think of the government decision. It's the government that holds power. And I don't think they're in a position anymore where they can impose things the way they did before. I mean, I respect the need to commemorate, the memory of those that were assassinated. It's their right, it's their leaders. But when there's a decision, it should be respected. But
it's that defiance, that show of force in the moment with those projections as well. Dalal, great to have you alongside us as well. Let's bring in the writer and broadcaster Agnès Poirier, author of the highly acclaimed Left Bank, Art, Passion, The Rebirth of Paris, and Notre Dame, The Soul of France. Great to see you. Agnès, let me ask you, what have you been working on this week?
I've been working on my next book, which is called...
Drum roll.
Right Bank, after Left Bank.
And tell us about what we will see, or is it still in very early days?
It's early days, early writing, but it's taking place between 1885 and 1908. It's the youth of Marcel Proust. So that's all I'm going to say. But of course, I had to come out of my writing den to talk about Nicolas Sarkozy and French politics in general.
It's a different side of the brain, isn't it? To sit down and write and then to work out instant responses to what's going on in the news.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll find out how it's going. Great to have you with us. Let's also bring in, to complete the lineup, Elisabeth Pinault, the Reuters correspondent covering the Élysée Palace and Matignon, the offices of the French President and French Prime Minister, author of the Vestiaire de Politique, the political locker room, which explores the role of French fashion in politics. We will be talking about the Sarkozy affair later in the programme, as Agnès mentioned, Elisabeth. But I would like to know, because you spend so much time there, behind the scenes, what's the gossip, something that we perhaps otherwise might not report on the Matignon, the life of the pickle, as they call him, Sébastien Lecornu, perhaps the Prime Minister. What's going on?
Well, it's been quiet, Sébastien Lecornu, since he was nominated on September 9th. He may have a new government next week. That's what I've been told, at the end of next week. But it's just a supposition. It's not sure. He gave an interview tonight at Le Parisien, not giving so many informations, just saying that he's going to, do something about the rich, if you want, but there won't be a new tax. So he's remaining very secretive. That's his new way of dealing with the situation, because he's really on the edge of being censored. So, and the next step would be another snap elections. So it's a very strange atmosphere these days in France, and politically, I've never known that. I've been in politics for 25 years, and I've never seen such a situation. It's very awkward. Emmanuel Macron was in New York for the UN General Assembly this week, so Lecornu was negotiating behind the scene. And well, life is going on in France. And, we had the Sarkozy trial that made the headlines yesterday. So life is going on with no government. And it's really unusual for France.
So political hay bales while President Macron is in New York. In terms of his relationship...
He's come back.
He's back now. For Le Cornu, is he known as somebody who's a journalist friendly over the years in terms of access?
Well, not particularly, but he's a good politician. He knows that he had to do something very different from everybody else before him, and especially Bayrou. And when he arrived in Bayrou, he talked a lot, and after every negotiations, he tried to, he was on the media and everything. And Le Cornu, he said, well, I will negotiate behind the scene and say nothing until the end, until something happens. People don't know him very much. He's been a minister for years, since the beginning, actually. He's very close to Emmanuel Macron. He's very young, 39, and he's he's a true politician. He really likes it. And everybody says that he's quite talented. Well, I found nobody saying, bad things about him. But still, this has to be proved. Can he, solve this almost insolvable situation? It's going to be very, very tough because the oppositions are really, really tough. Even again today, the socialists say, well, he's looking for censorship. So, and the socialists are the ones that he has to seduce to avoid it. So it's not an easy job.
There were lots of suggestions last week about how long he will last, given we've had 4 prime ministers gone in 2 years. Will he last longer than a lettuce, as famously Liz Truss didn't outlive the lifespan of a lettuce? Does anybody have any thoughts as to will he make it past Christmas? Borzou?
I have no idea. I'm not following it that closely.
Agnes, you surely venture.
I wouldn't bet anything. No, it's impossible to say.
Well, if he doesn't have an agreement, he could say as early as next week or the week after, well, I give up. I won't speak to the General Assembly if it's to be thrown out the next day. So he may give up.
But I think it's Macron's last card, and then the possibility of dissolving the assembly becomes more of a reality than it was before. Because what are the options left for him? He doesn't want someone from the left in the government. He didn't take this option. But I think Le Cornu is doing his best, knowing that it's the last opportunity. The issue is, I think Le Cornu is the closest thing to Macron, so there's no one that's...
I would differ. No, I don't think he's loyal to Macron, but he's very different.
He's not mini Macron.
He's not. He's very loyal. He's been with him since the beginning.
True.
But he's a Gaullist. He's a right-wing Gaullist. He was elected mayor, I think, at the age of 27. So he's got a local base. He knows very well about, politics in a Gaullist way, which is not at all the experience.
So you think he will have a margin of independence more than Bayrou and Barnier?
Yeah.
Well, for somebody who didn't want to venture a guess, you've given us a little bit more, and we're not going to let Le Cornu take up any more of our time, especially if he doesn't talk that much to the press. OK, let's begin with the choreography of Western diplomacy that took place this week. Starting Sunday, 3 statements coordinated to be released at the same time from 3 governments, opposite times of the day. Australia, Canada, the UK, formally recognising the state of Palestine, 11 p.m. in Sydney, 9 a.m. in Ottawa, 2 p.m. in London. Canada made it clear recognising was not normalising, that to normalise relations, Hamas had to go, have no part in a future democratic Palestinian state. That was for a later stage, but within 24 hours, 7 more nations and principalities would follow suit at the UN. Portugal, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta, Andorra, Monaco and France, making a total of 157 out of 193 UN member states that now recognise Palestine. And President Macron set out his reasoning.
Le temps est venu.
The time has come. That is why, faithful to my country's historical commitment to the Middle East, for peace between the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, I declare today that France recognizes the state of Palestine.
The The statements are not without controversy. Why now? Being the primary issue raised by the families of 20 living hostages kept in apparent near-death state in Gaza. And the stance is not Europe-wide. Berlin, Copenhagen, the Baltic states, all vocal about the messaging might be right, but the timing is wrong, they argued. And with Israel's reaction from the right-wing members of the cabinet to annex parts of the West Bank as long planned in a legal settlement proposal called Area E1, how can there be two states, given the state of the occupied territories, one reduced to rubble and the other occupied by hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers? Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would respond at the end of the UN summit. He did a short while ago, saying there will never be a Palestinian state and blaming those that stepped forward to recognise Palestine, saying it was a mark of shame upon them. Bozu, let's start with that response from Netanyahu. Choreographed, planned. What did you make of it?
I think that Netanyahu's audience right now internationally is an audience of one, that is the United States. There is a certain desperation there. On the left, forget it. Israel is considered a pariah. Among the young, it's finished. The romance between Americans and Israel is finished. And now what you see, and this is something I've been exploring over the last couple of weeks a lot, is the collapse of the Israel consensus in the American right. And this is, highly dangerous for Netanyahu's brand of politics, because what you're seeing is just enormous, the Overton window, the kind of space where people are allowed to talk about certain things that every country has, simply, thrown open by, right-wing figures such as Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, and so on. And this, the assassination of this right-wing activist, the Charlie Kirk, it really threw open just how divisive this issue has become. People are saying, his kind of the kind of default response to any criticism of Israel that it's anti-Semitism, it simply doesn't work in the U.S. anymore. It's become completely ineffective. It's become obvious that American Jews are at the forefront of the voices that are speaking out against Israel and what the UN has termed a genocide. And so that is creating a lot of nervousness for Netanyahu, and that is why that was the tone of the speech, that was the audience of the speech.
And Bozu talks about an audience of one, Dalal. President Trump, who is always seen to be sort of echoing the thoughts and championing the position of Benjamin Netanyahu, in the last 24 hours, I wonder if that's changed slightly when we look at the statements on the West Bank saying that will never go ahead, any further annexation. What's your take?
Kevin, we never know with Trump. That's the problem. We just mentioned earlier that as Netanyahu was making his speech, and just 5 minutes after he ended it, was a very negative speech where he literally condemned the Palestinians to no statehood, right? He said, it's not going to happen. The Israelis don't want it. We don't want it. And it's not going to happen. You have Trump saying, we're very close to a deal. So you see the discrepancy here, and the gap is huge. What's happening? Is Trump not aware of what Netanyahu said? Is this on purpose? I don't trust Trump when it comes to this issue. I think it's clear that the U.S. is not a credible mediator between Palestinians and Israelis. It's taken a clear side. And when we talk about a pariah state, today, Israel is more and more isolated. I think the only country that is literally supporting Israel unconditionally is the United States. I want to talk about the recognition, though, and this is something that Trump said, he was against. Recognition is a right, Gavin. Self-determination is something that's enshrined in international law. So I think recognition should not be a reward or a punishment, and I think it's been framed as such, unfortunately. And I think the timing is unfortunate because there's a tragedy that's unfolding, the genocide in Gaza or the tragedy in the West Bank. So I think that for it not to be just symbolic, because, these countries have been accused of taking a very symbolic step because the two-state solution on the ground is not realistic. What France, because we're here in France and I cover France, what France needs to do is to take serious actions, very concrete actions against Israel. Otherwise, it's going to be a symbolic step. And to this day, France is among the European countries who recognized Palestine but took no sanctions against Israel, not even against Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. So I think concrete actions is a must here. And I think I hear a lot about the day after, and President Macron keeps repeating there are French propositions on the day after. And my worry is whether it's the French proposition or what's been going on now about Tony Blair heading an international, transitional authority, or other Trump, the Riviera, etc. Where is Palestinian sovereignty in all of that? That's the question that we are asking today, because it feels like we are not giving them that right, to self-govern. Yes, you want to sideline Hamas. The Palestinian Authority has very little legitimacy among Palestinians. But that doesn't mean that the Palestinians don't have the right to govern themselves. And when, for instance, the Blair thing that's been circulating
we'll get onto the Blair thing.
In the media. Okay,
we will get onto the Blair thing. No, it's a good point.
But it sounds to me like, a British mandate 2.0. That's, it's... And Tony Blair, who went to the Iraq war with George Bush, if you ask Palestinians, they're not happy about all of these propositions. Is anyone asking the Palestinians what they want? That's the question as well.
Okay, you've taken us there. Tony Blair, the governor of Gaza, this is basically that he's not denied reports that have come out, a number of outlets to say that he's working as the head of this transitional authority until there is a Palestinian respected proposal in place. What do you think?
Well, we know that Blair had gone to Washington a few times to meet with the Trump administration to work on that strange French Riviera in Gaza. And now this is more serious in the sense that they are not talking about, flooding social networks with those AI strange films about a Trump Tower in Gaza, etc. So now we have, when Tony Blair left Downing Street, he became the special envoy for the Quartet, the UN, the EU, Russia, and the US in the Middle East. He's got, you have to be fair to him, he's got negotiation skills. We know with Northern Ireland. But of course, it's easy to be quite doubtful about their plan for after the ceasefire. We'll know more about it, I think, on Monday when Netanyahu and Trump meet in Washington. But it's very intriguing. They talk about a Palestinian committee overseen by an international advisory board. Blair would be the chair of that. And there would be also the deployment of a peacekeeping force made mostly of neighbor countries. All we know is that on the margins of the UN sessions this week, a lot of countries, serious countries with the take on the situation, Egypt, Qatar, Pakistan, Indonesia. Actually, the president of Indonesia said something quite interesting. He said that if Israel recognizes a Palestinian state, then Indonesia will straight away recognize the state of Israel. So, we know that something is cooking, they are preparing something. We'll judge on the facts. But at
least there is an attempt there to move momentum. But to Elizabeth, to Dalal's point as well, and to Agnes's point about this being an unfortunate time, and well, it's not to an extent that Keir Starmer made it explicit, didn't he? In June, he said that there were three things that Israel had to do. One was to bring about a ceasefire. Two was to be serious about long-term peace prospects. And three was to allow the UN to restart its food distributions there. I'm wondering, from a French perspective, for President Macron, he was doing the media rounds afterwards. He spoke as well to France 24. Behind the rhetoric, is it to show that the emotional the international support is ebbing away, or is it, to Agnes's point, he really feels that this is a point that can very quickly get momentum?
Well, I think Macron tried to keep a very balanced speech on that, considering that France is home for the biggest Muslim and Jewish community. So he is always very careful in that. The part of France is not in the first row in these. He was, of course, first to say that he wanted to recognize a Palestinian state, and he was followed by some other countries. And but I think he tried to keep balance, and there's been a debate in France, of course, to say that it's too soon or too late, or he shouldn't have said that, and that was promoting Hamas. But he said that it's a blow to Hamas and not a gift, and he just tried to keep a very balanced position.
And with Starmer Bourseau, let's go back to 2014. It was under David Cameron's Conservative government that the Parliament in the UK acknowledged that they would vote to recognise the state of Palestine. So to the point of why now, and Keir Starmer making it explicit that Israel had to meet these targets, the accusations from the opposition is that might be well and good, but this is an empty gesture in terms of timing.
I think that actually this is an attempt to respond to public demand at this point. For Macron, I mean, he's the lamest of lame ducks. I think, and actually, I wonder if this is true, but I actually tend to think that it was a matter of principle at this point, especially given what is happening in Gaza. I don't think any of these leaders want to be on the wrong side of history. Donald Trump may not live in that kind of mental space where he thinks about that kind of stuff, but every other leader in the world is thinking about how they're going to be remembered 10 years from now when the talk of what happened in Gaza and what world leaders did, at the very least, Macron, Starmer, the leaders of other European countries who took this long overdue step that many countries all over the world have already taken, can say that, look, we did our best, we tried to do this, we tried to do that, we recognize Palestine at this moment. So I think that there is such a popular swell of opposition to Israel and support for what is happening, support for the Palestinian people and solidarity, that leaders have no choice but to respond.
That takes us, Bourseau, nicely to Tuesday evening, back to New York. Close to 9 o'clock in the evening, it was 3 in the morning here in Paris. President Trump put out a Truth Social message unlike any before. It came after he'd met with Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, in the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And this is what it said. It said, I'm getting to fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation. I think Ukraine, with the support of the EU, is in a position to fight and to win, caps lock, all of Ukraine back in its original form. From no cards back in February, and now infamous row we look back on at the White House, to potentially all the cards. He goes on to say Russia is being made to look like a paper tiger in its aimless fight, and concludes that in any event, I wish both countries well. We will continue to supply NATO for NATO to do what they want. Good luck to all. Seemingly over and out. Will he say something different tomorrow? Perhaps, but President Zelensky called it a massive shift and a positive signal. First, let's go to Dalal on this, because I just wonder, we talked about whether there's a nuance and change of Trump on Israel. Are we seeing a real significant change on Trump now?
Again, I'm not sure. What he's signaling for sure is impatience. And I think, he's mentioned this in the past few months, that, when he came in, he thought he was going to end the war, he said, in a day, right? And he hasn't tested Vladimir Putin, and he's not getting what he wants. It might be a negotiation tactic, and, just trying to send Putin a message. I've heard from Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland. I think he also put that on the table, that he's leaving us. And he's shifting the burden on the EU. It might be the case, but at the same time, we've seen a shift in narrative with Trump since June, I would say, talking about security guarantees for Ukraine, talking about possible, further sanctions on Ukraine. So there might be a change, but we have to wait and see, or it might just be a negotiation tactic, as I'm saying. What's for sure, just on the Ukraine front, because there's a new package of sanctions, right, that's been imposed on Russia. What I feel is that at this point, sanctions alone are no longer enough to change the course of this war, or using anything that's related to oil exports. And at the same time, there are sanctions, but there are still European countries, right, importing oil. And I think military deterrence might be the only way to put further pressure on Russia. And that's what the French have been trying to do, and leading a movement. I think that might be a deterrence, because I think Russia sees this as a war of dominance more than it's a strategic war of dominance more than anything that's economic. And the fact that you're seeing all these Russian drones above, Poland and Romania, Russia is at war with Europe, whether we like it or not. And I think that, just increasing military deterrence might be the way out, and to put pressure on Putin to go back to negotiations, because I don't see sanctions changing much, to be honest.
Well, one thing he did say, and maybe Trump had a point here, Borsu, and Elizabeth, would get your point as well, which is that Turkey, he said he wanted to work with Erdogan about the oil and what they're receiving, Hungary, Slovakia, the French as well, taking LNG gas as well, liquid nitrogen gas as well. And they're stuck in a contract, isn't that right, Elizabeth? Essentially, it would be more expensive to buy themselves out of it than it is to stay in.
I think so, yes. As far as France is concerned, this is Trump. You have to be very careful about what he says. And Macron was very careful on France 24 when he said, okay, we are happy that he's saying that. It was a very clear message. We think it's encouraging, but still we need the US. That's what Macron is always very careful with Trump, even if he says crazy things or different things from one day to another. He always says we still need the US. The U.S. equipment, Kiev needs the U.S. equipment, the U.S. intelligence, U.S. support, and he tries to preserve that at any price for now. He knows that Trump wants Europe to do everything and pay for American weapons, but still Macron is very careful with his words on Trump, saying that we need the U.S. support for Ukraine, and he's very careful about that.
Look, with Trump, it's the corruption, stupid. That's basically what he's about. And if you parse his statement very carefully, if you look at Germany and France and their plans for just massive investment in infrastructure and military equipment over the next decades, and I'm sure he's looking, he said, my thoughts have been changed because I've been better informed. Basically, he sees an opportunity for him and his billionaire friends to make a lot of money selling weapons. So let the war continue.
But he's fairly open with that, though, isn't he? He talks about selling weapons and loaning to Kyiv that has to be paid back to the US, and it's a win-win for him. And that's, if you could argue, he's being upfront about it. And his converse problem has been with the French and others to say, you're saying you're supporting Ukraine, but you're supporting Russia with its gas.
But the point is that France is nuclear energy. But, in terms of...
But it's still by nitrogen gas.
Yeah, it's still by some natural gas. But the point is that for Trump, this is completely, his worldview is completely selfish and myopic. And what he sees and what he has calculated is that let this war continue. It's good for the United States if the war continues. I think that's the dark and cynical conclusion that he has come to. Forget about peace. Okay, no problem. Let's give up on peace efforts anyway. Russia doesn't want it. I'm not going to get my Nobel Prize that he's always talking about for ending this war. So at least I can profit off of the increased spending of European countries on defense over the next few years.
So the penny hasn't dropped, says Borsu. This is about personal gain. Agnes.
Well, it is, but it doesn't change the situation for us in Europe. I mean, we must take responsibility. I mean, there's a shift in responsibility. That's what Donald Tusk said. And in terms of what Trump was saying and seemingly disengaging, good luck, guys. I will give weapons to NATO. You can do whatever you want with them. You can shoot down those Russian planes. And we might have to do that soon because all those drones. I mean, the problem we have, and we're realizing, is that we're completely ill-equipped because we're not going to shoot down drones that have cost, sometimes a few euros, if you look at the Iranian ones, with missiles that
are costing
cost
hundreds of thousands of millions. Which the Polish did with those drones that were sent over. They sent up the Air Force.
So we need to do that pretty quickly because you're right. We're at war with Russia, not on the battlefield yet, but it's a hybrid, war with hybrid attacks. It's been going on actually since before the war in Ukraine. But the interesting thing that is coming out of first from Berlin and now von der Leyen, I think an hour ago, is those frozen Russian assets. We've got almost 200 billion euros. We need to use them. We need to use them and give Ukraine for them to get weapons and to wage that war and win it.
And to which that's not an easy channel, because also today we had an open letter in the Financial Times from Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, saying the opposite of that. He doesn't want to use frozen assets. He wants Europe to bridge together with a loan for 160 billion.
Yes, but the loan would be actually, it's a very complicated and complex affair. But the loan is actually completely linked to those 200 billion euros worth of Russian assets. So we would be using them in the end. It's a complex
financial plan which involves all Europeans. To your point as well, let's mention the airspace violations, the dominant theme of the UN summit this week as well, particularly for President Zelensky and for European leaders. Estonia triggering Article 4, the right to consult members this week after last week's invasion on Friday of its airspace by 3 Russian MiG-31s, 12 minutes, and coming after 19 Russian drones, as Anya said, were down in Poland, 1 in Romania, and then Danish airports temporarily closed this week, seemingly linked to Russian drones. So on the issue of what NATO does if its airspace is violated again, here's the view from the US and Poland this week.
Any questions?
Mr. President, do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned.
You have been warned. Basu, responding with a missile in NATO circles, it's known as going down the Turkish route. There is history there.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that was after repeated violations in 2015 of Turkish airspace by Russian fighter jets bombing basically civilians in northwest Syria. The Turkish NATO-equipped Turkey shot down Russian planes. It was for about a year or so. There was a enmity between Russia and Turkey, and then that ended. So it wasn't the end of the world to shoot down a Russian MiG fighter jet. Look, Russia is a menace to Europe, and it is definitely testing its limits. You mentioned the attacks on the airspace violations. There's also been, numerous cyber attacks on France and other countries, including, as a colleague was mentioning, Moldova, which is having a crucial election right now, one of the countries that is in the gray zone between East and West. And so I think that this is a real problem, and it is something that European leaders have to address, and they can no longer count on the US to help them with that.
This is a really interesting case, isn't it, Dalal? In Moldova this week and the weekend, a potentially more serious case of Russian meddling. This is about direct implications to vote for pro-Russian parties, huge implications. There is a billionaire fugitive, Ilan Shaw, who is openly saying he would pay people $3,000 a month to protest against pro-EU parties, and that's just the start of it.
Yeah, there are fears of vote rigging, paying voters, but cyber attacks increasingly happening ahead of these elections. And what's interesting is that in the past, for instance, in the 2024 elections with the Biden administration, the U.S. were supporting Moldova with, stopping these cyber attacks. And that kind of support has stopped with the Trump administration because of all these cuts, including to, USAID and other organizations that worked in Eastern European countries. And so there are a lot of Moldovans saying that they're worried that this time they don't have that kind of buffer, that these attacks are increasing. And, as I said, Russia is in a war of dominance here. And that's why it keeps meddling in all these elections in Eastern Europe, and Moldova is no exception. And there are worries because if the election results are pro-Russia, it might also delay Moldova's candidacy to the EU, and it's a very serious candidate because I think the pro-European party is a minority party today, and it risks changing the political landscape of the country to the advantage of Russia, and that's what it's trying to do.
That election this Sunday, which we will cover here live during the evening on France 24. Let's go to courtroom 32 of the Paris Correctional Court. Thursday afternoon, packed with reporters and spectators. The overflow seating area in the rooms next door were overflowing too. Such was the interest in the case's conclusion. Nicolas Sarkozy, former president from 2007 to 2012, found guilty of criminal conspiracy to illegally obtain money from the late Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi, to fund his 2007 election campaign. As far as proven details of the case go, quite few details are clear. Sarkozy, now 70, was acquitted on 3 other charges, including passive corruption, illegal campaign financing. He was found guilty of allowing close aides to contact Libyan officials to try to obtain the cash. The president, once known as President Bling Bling for his love of luxury lifestyle and flash watches, has the ignominy of being the first French head of state to have to wear an electronic tag. After being found guilty of wiretapping last year, he's also now the first to serve time. And there was apparently a shocked intake of breath around the court at the verdict. Sarkozy told reporters outside, "I'm innocent, I will not apologise for something I didn't do." Well, I know you were covering this case this week, Dalal, and talking about this case, but I would like also round the table reflections on this, starting with you, Dalal.
No, I'm Lebanese. I left Lebanon because of corruption and because of the lack of accountability and justice. So when I saw this, the first thing that comes to my mind, the judiciary in this country works, and it's telling politicians you're not going to get an easy ride no matter what. He's not the first politician to be convicted. He's the first president in France's modern history. And he's been indicted in 2 other corruption cases. So it's not the first. And there are politicians from the left and the right that have been also, condemned or convicted for corruption. But what's interesting is the reactions that we've seen. First of all, he was playing the victim card and saying, "I'm the victim of hatred," as if, the judge or the judiciary was going against him personally. And then you had the reactions on the left, on the right, that very much reflect the division that we have in France today, how fractured the country is. The left saying, this is, what's supposed to happen, this is accountability. But the right defending Sarkozy and Marine Le Pen, for instance, from the far right, because she is also convicted, right? And she has a case of her own, saying this is unfair and we're setting a precedence here because he's going to be behind bars even during the appeal. He's not going to be able, to get out. So I think it's just, for me, it's a sign of a democracy where there's accountability and a judiciary that is functioning. And the judge said that it's a very serious case. I think there's enough evidence, and he's been acquitted from other charges, so it's...
Well, with, I think, 12 years of evidence, this case going back to or more, 2012, it was Mediapart, the French investigative site, that first released details about this. And let's have a look at the non-verbal communication here. This was Carla Bruni, a partner of Nicolas Sarkozy, also outside the courtroom with reporters. This is what happened.
Je vous remercie.
Monsieur le Président, vous voyez une injustice?
Elisabeth, thoughts?
Well, it's a real shock for France, really, because Nicolas Sarkozy is a real figure. Even recently, he was talking to Macron, to Le Cornu. He was still very much into the political, behind-the-scene political landscape. And he's going to be the first French president in the post-war era to go to prison. So that's symbolically very, very strong. And I agree with you that it really rose the debate between the left and the right. The left saying that he deserved it and that everybody is equal in front of the jury, and the right saying that this is unfair, that this is, and there are real big discussions. Even the president of the Senate, who is from the Conservatives, he said that he was worried. There is this question of provisional execution, meaning you can go to jail before the appeal, and that's what's being discussed. People say, well, the people who are on Sarkozy's side say you're presumed innocent. So the debate is still on. And Le Cornu expressed his friendship to Sarkozy tonight. That's interesting. But it's just the beginning. But apparently, he will go to jail for sure.
He would go for jail for sure. He says it's a big case against him. It's basically those after Libya, because he chose to intervene with the NATO intervention there, that it's revenge against him. A quick thought.
I was in Libya in 2011 under the Gaddafi regime, and this was the first thing that people in the regime would bring up, that this man betrayed us. We gave him all this money. They kept saying it over. I interviewed Saif al-Islam once, and he said this, the son of Gaddafi. He said this. One of the first things he said, I met with the oil minister once, and he said this. So they've been talking about this, the sense of betrayal. They're probably the ones who leaked it to Mediapart in 2012, the Gaddafi loyalists. And I knew that this would come back to haunt him at some point.
30 seconds, Agnès. Shocking case.
A shocking case because it's a stain on him, but it's also a stain on us all. In many ways, he's a French president. It's never happened in modern French history. We elected him. I mean, I didn't personally, but we did collectively. So, nobody's coming out of it, completely, sound and safe. Having said that, I mean, it's very dangerous what he's saying that, they've got something against him. They are left-leaning judges. You have to believe in your justice system, or there's no justice.
Agnès, thank you. It's a brief mention tonight because after more than 3 years, there's talks going on, we understand, still between the Iranian government and the French government over the release of 3 detainees. Cécile Collet, Jacques Paris, have been held for more than 3 years on a tourist visa, and Leonard Montelot. There had been some talk from the Iranian foreign minister that they were close to a final deal on what he called a, quote, prisoner swap, but no news yet. Thank you for my guests tonight. It's been a really interesting programme, a fascinating week at the UN. Elisabeth Pinault, Reuters correspondent covering the Élysée Palace and Matignon. We also have the writer, broadcaster Agnès Poirier, Dalal Mawad, Paris-based Lebanese correspondent for Al Arabi Network and author as well. And we also have 3-time Pulitzer Prize-nominated international correspondent Borzou Daragahi. We're going to leave you with one of the viral moments of the week. We haven't mentioned it yet, as the president is consigned to porridge. He's been talking about Mr. Sarkozy. The current one was trying to walk the US streets to gain entry to the French embassy, not exactly incognito, access denied too. Not everyone can call the president with a guess what happened. Thank you for watching. If your name's not down, you're not coming in. But if it is, then you're more than welcome. We'll see you in 7 days for the world next week.
How are you? Guess what? I'm waiting the street because everything is frozen for you. I don't know, it's still 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But I would love if we can. Yeah, I know, I will follow. But after I would love if we can have a short discussion with Qatar and you on the situation.
France 24 pushes digital news even further. Reviews, analysis, and insights. France 24 recommends the most read articles. Follow us and don't miss a thing. France 24, your first choice for news.